Hi everybody, I hope you're doing well. I'm back with another art project for the month. And with this art project, we are going to focus on patterns. And a pattern is basically a repeating unit of shape or form. So such as in this art project here, a Native American headdress, we are going to use patterns to make these headdresses this month. And we're doing a Native American headdress because we all know the big holiday that falls in November, Thanksgiving, the feast between the Native Americans and the Pilgrims. So I thought it would be fun to do a beautiful Native American headdress to talk about pattern. Now, as you can see, there's lots of different patterns that you can use and even create your own. These patterns just help bring a touch of design and more visual interest to your projects, and it also helps define different sections of your art composition in your project. So we are going to just have fun with patterns this month, and we're going to go ahead and do it by creating these beautiful headdresses. So I'm going to show you the supplies that you're going to need, and we are going to get started. The materials you're going to need for this month's project is a piece of white paper from your drawing pad. Now, if you do not have a drawing pad, you can just get a piece of copy paper. That will work too. You also want some construction paper. If you do not have construction paper, it's optional. You can still do this project without it. You want a black permanent marker, a pencil, an eraser, a pair of scissors, a glue stick, washable markers, some sort of container to put some water in, and then your watercolor set. And your watercolor set should have come with a paintbrush. Now, if you do not have watercolors, you can still do this project. So you will just use something different like colored pencils or crayons, but we will get to that further in the video. But right now, if these are the materials you need, so you can go ahead and gather those together and we'll get started. The first step in drawing our Native American headdress is we're going to draw the head. So basically what we're going to do is we're just going to go at the bottom of our white paper here, and we're just going to make a big frowny face or semicircle. Now again, I'm going to be using a marker so you can see it well on camera, but you should be using a pencil at this point. So starting at the bottom of my paper, I'm just going to make a semicircle to represent the top of the head. Once we have the head drawn, we're going to go ahead and we're going to put in a line across the bottom of the head to represent the headband of the headdress. Now, I made my line, about an inch or so up from the bottom of my paper. You can make this as thick as you want it to be. So I'm just going to come across here at the bottom and draw my line straight across. So you should have something like this. I'm going to show you a couple ways you can draw your feathers. Now you can draw your feathers either one of these ways, or you can just totally draw them the way you want and use your own imagination. But the first way I'm going to show you is how I drew them on my project. How I gave them some jagged edges just to give them the appearance that they're a little feathery. So what you're basically going to do is you're just going to start at the top of your head here, and you're just going to draw some curved lines up, and then at any point you want, you just stop, angle your line down inward, and then continue your feather up with another curved line, and then angle your line down inward, and just continue that all the way around till you have a completed feather. So here I'll show you. So I'm drawing a curved line upward. I'm going to stop and I'm going to draw a short line angled inward like that to create a tip. And then I'm just going to continue that feather upward again and stop. Draw another line inward and to create another tip. Now at any point I can decide to come down the other side. So I'm going to make this the top of one feather, and I'm going to just go ahead and I'm just going to bring this down and start finishing my feather. So I'm bringing that curved line down farther, and I'm going to now make my line go outward and up to create another tip like this. And then I'll continue my curved line down farther. Make another short line going outward and up. And then I'm going to just go ahead and draw another curved line coming back down to the top of the head. So you have something like this. Excuse me. So that's one way you can draw a feather. Another way is just making simple, straight, curved lines. Something like this. Now, I do want to take this time to note too, when you look at your headdress and you're drawing your headdress, your feathers are going to be layered. So you're going to have some feathers in the front and you're going to have some feathers in the back. Now, you also want to think about the positioning of your feathers. So they're all not going to just go perfectly up straight. They're going to kind of stick out around the sides, and then the closer they get to the middle, they're going to be more straight. So think about that when you're drawing your feathers, all right? Think about the angle at which you're drawing them, all right? So for this one, the second one's going to be tucked behind this first one. So I'm going to just start about an inch or so out from the first one I drew, and then I'm going to draw a curved line all the way up, and then I'm just going to bring the curved line back down, and I'm going to stop when I hit this feather to make it appear that it's behind the front feather. So again, I'm just going to make one big curved line up like this, and then I'm just going to bring that curved line back down until I meet my first feather. Like this, okay? Now, once you have all your feathers drawn, this is where the fun also continues, and that you can decide how you want to design your feathers. So basically, you're thinking about the patterns you want to use on your feathers. Now, in my headdress, I actually took a line and I drew it down through the middle of my feathers to divide my feather into two sections. So it looks like something like this. So instead of having one segment to decorate, I now have two. Now, you don't have to divide your feather into two sections if you don't want to. You can just leave it as one section to design and decorate with a pattern. Up to you. Maybe you want to divide one feather into four sections, so you draw another line across and have four sections instead of two. This is totally up to you. You can make this as complex or as simple as you want it to be. So as you see, I only put patterns into 3 of my feathers, and then I put some plain feathers in the background to just help these patterned feathers pop. So that's another thing you can consider while you design and draw your headdress. And again, here are some examples of some different patterns I used. I used some polka dots, I used checkers, I used a chevron, I just used some stripes. Now you don't have to use this many of patterns. You can just use 2 different patterns. You can make this as simple or as complex again as you want. But just think about the different patterns that you can use, and also about maybe putting some solid feathers in with your pattern feathers to just make your pattern feathers pop. Once you have your feathers all drawn and designed with your patterns, let's talk about the top of the head. Now, the reason I did this pattern on the top of the head is I wanted it to mimic hair. So what I did is I drew a line straight down through the middle here, and then I just drew some horizontal lines straight across to just mimic strands of hair. I also didn't want to make this pattern too crazy because I had so much going on up in my feathers. I didn't want to distract from the patterns in my feathers. So I just kind of kept it simple, and I tried to make this pattern mimic hair. So I'll show you here really quick. Okay, so I basically just found the middle point of the top of my head, and I drew a vertical line down to the top of the headband. Something as simple as this. And then I just drew some horizontal lines from left to right. Now I did curve my lines. Notice my lines are curved a little bit to represent the roundness of the head, okay? Because the head is round. So to try to make it look round, I put some curves in my lines. I did not just make them straight across. So I just started at the top. And I just drew some slightly curved lines through the top of the head. So you'd have something that looks like this. Now, I didn't get them very straight, so you can work better on that. I'm just kind of sketching this here quick, but you get the idea that you just want to curve your line a little bit, and then I just tried to make sure they were equal distance between the line. Now, if you have another idea of your head and you want to do something different with your hair, go for it. But just keep in mind, the busier you get down here, the more distracting it can be from your patterns up here. Now we're going to talk about designing our headband. Now, as you can see on my project here, I went with just more of a triangular pattern with some dots in the middle of a few of them, and then some lines through the center of some of the others. Now, I tried not to make this too complex down here because I didn't want it to get too busy looking, and again, I didn't want it to distract from my feathers up above. So I'm going to show you how I did this pattern on my project, but you can create your own pattern and come up with your own. So the first thing I did is I just started at the left side here, and I just made triangles all the way across. Okay, now you could leave it just at this point and just keep it that simple. But then I took it a couple steps farther, and in the triangles that are upside down at the top, I just drew some vertical lines up and down through the center of those triangles, like this. So now I have something that looks like that. And just to dress up the bottom triangles here a little bit, I went in and just put a black dot in the center of each one. Here's my finished headband for my headdress. Now, once you have your feathers drawn with the patterns, your hair drawn, and your headband drawn, you can now get your permanent Sharpie marker or whatever black permanent marker you have, and you're going to trace all of your lines with your black permanent marker. It's very important that you use a black permanent marker because we are going to use some watercolor paints in this project, and if you use a washable marker, the watercolor will make your marker bleed. So again, very important that you have a black permanent marker. So go ahead and outline all your pencil lines with your marker. Once you have all your pencil lines traced with your permanent marker, you can then grab an eraser, and you want to go back and erase any of those pencil lines that still may be showing. You don't want those to show through your project when you go in and color it in and paint it in with your watercolors. So go ahead and erase those pencil lines, and then you can grab your washable markers because now it's time to start coloring. And this is where it gets really fun because now you can start thinking about the colors you want to use in your headdress. Now I used a bunch of different colors because I wanted this to just pop with color and be very colorful. But you might want to just use all warm colors like red, orange, and yellow. Or maybe you want to use just all cool colors like purples, greens, and blues. Or mix them up like I did. That's up to you. So start thinking about what colors you want to make your headdress. The other thing you want to think about is, if you notice, I only colored the feathers that had my patterns in them with the washable markers. My plain feathers in the background, I used my watercolors for. And the reason I did that was to show a difference in texture. The solid, more transparent looking feathers in the back helps the patterned colored feathers in the marker pop even more. So you might want to think about that depending on how many feathers that you drew in your headdress. You may want to save some of them to fill in with watercolor paint. So go ahead and grab your markers. Think about the colors you want to use and which feathers you want to color with your markers, and start having some fun. Once you have all your feathers colored, all your patterns colored, the ones you want to color in marker, now let's think about the hair. All right, now if you notice, there goes my little background there. If you notice, I used marker and watercolor in my hair. Now the reason I did this is because if I colored it all in with my black marker, I would have lost my pattern and my lines. So to show some contrast and show my pattern, I colored a few of my lines in with my dark marker, and then the rest I used my watercolor with. Again, I like the difference of texture, but it also helped my pattern show through. So that's something you can think about when you go to do your hair. I would encourage you to maybe leave some areas for your watercolor to get the difference, the contrast with the textures, and to just maybe make your pattern more interesting. The next thing, as you can see here, is my headband. I totally painted it in with watercolor. I wanted to keep this kind of simple. I did not want to make it purposely too colorful and bold because, again, I did not want it to compete and distract from all the colors and the pattern in my headdress. I want my feathers to be the emphasis of this art project. So my hair and my headband, I kept pretty simple. So those are just some things to think about. But go ahead if there's any areas you want your marker. Now again, this is something that you have to remember and keep in mind. If you want to color any of your design in with black, make sure you use your permanent Sharpie marker, because when you go in to use your watercolor, if this is washable marker, it's going to bleed. Again, up here in the feathers, as you can see, I did not put any watercolor in with my washable marker. My watercolor was separate from my washable marker. So down here, you just need to be aware of that. You don't want to mix your washable marker and your watercolor, because that watercolor will bleed those washable markers. So just use your permanent black markers instead, okay? Now let's talk about the watercolors here. On your art list, you should have had a set of watercolors. Now most watercolors, if you got a bigger set like this, comes with a paintbrush, and this paintbrush will do just fine. If you don't have a paintbrush with your watercolor set, you are welcome to get permission from your supervisor and ask if you can borrow one from the art room in the supply cupboard. I just ask that you return it when you're done. The thing about watercolors is, especially if you have a dry set like this, you want to be careful not to get crazy with your water. It doesn't take a lot of water to get these started. So basically all you're going to do is you're just going to take your paintbrush and you're just going to dip the tip of your paintbrush in the water. You don't have to submerge it. So you just dip the tip like that. And then all you need to do is come over here and just lightly brush the color you want to use. Now, what you want to do at this point is you just come to your paper and you just start painting the section that you want painted. Now, as you can see, I'm not sure you can see this very well, I'm sorry. I'm just moving that water all around. Okay? I have plenty of water here and plenty of paint here on my project that every time I make a stroke, I don't have to go back and keep adding more water and more paint to my project. If it's not dark enough, if you want something darker than it appears, just let it sit for a minute, go back and get more paint, because as this water sits, the longer it sits on your paint here, the darker and more concentrated it will get. And then you can come back, and after this sat for a little bit and you let that water absorb into your paper, now look how dark that is. Now if you find that it's too dark, you can always get a paper towel and just dab it and pick some of that color up. The thing is, you want to make sure that you don't over wet your paper, because if you put too much water on your paper, you're going to really start making it wrinkle, especially if you're just using copy paper, a thinner paper, and you're just going to have more problems with your water wanting to maybe bleed over your lines, and you just don't want to soak it because you don't want to get your paper so wet and so thin that you end up getting a hole in your paper. Okay, so again, little bits at a time. If you find you go back to get some more paint and it's soaked up or it's too dark, just again add a little more water to your paint and just freshen it up. Okay, and again, it's always important to wash your brush before you go to a new color. And after you wash your brush, I encourage you to just either scrape it on the side of your cup a little bit, because sometimes there's more water in that brush than you think. So when you go to put it in your paint, you get a big puddle of water on your paint, and maybe more than you wanted. So again, just a little at a time, and then you can just go in and paint all the areas that you saved for your watercolor. Again, I painted some of my feathers with watercolor, I painted some of my hair with watercolor, and I painted the headband with watercolor. Now, if you don't have watercolor, you can still do this. If you don't want to color it all in with marker, because you want some contrast, instead of using watercolor, you could use crayon or you could use colored pencils. Just use a different medium. So you can still do this project and you can still have a really cool project in the end. You can just use a different material like colored pencils or crayons. So go ahead and finish coloring in and painting in your headdress and have fun with that. Okay, once you have your headdress all colored and painted in, it's time for the final step. Now, this final step is optional. If you do not have construction paper, you do not have to do this. Your options would be to just take your watercolor paints or your color pencils or crayons, whatever you're using, and you can just color in the white background around your headdress if you want, or if you just want to keep it white, you can. Now, the reason I cut my headdress out and I glued it onto a piece of construction paper is I wanted to create some more, I'm freezing here, okay? I think my camera's back. I wanted to create some more texture in my project. And I kind of like how it makes my headdress even pop a little more, because I'm not sure if you can see it on camera, but some of my little edges, my tips and stuff are sticking up a little bit. So it makes it look a little more 3D. So I feel like it just brings more emphasis to my project as well. So all I did was just took my headdress once it was all finished, and I just took my scissors and I just cut around the outside edges very carefully. And then once I had it cut out, I just took my glue stick and I made sure I just put plenty of glue around all the edges, the outside edges, and even some in the center of my headdress on the back. So I just flipped it over and I took my glue stick and I just put some glue all around the edges, making sure I paid attention to the tips. I put some in the middle. Now, you don't want to take too long doing this because you don't want your glue stick to start drying on you. But once you got the glue all around your edges, you just flip it over. And I didn't take the time to cut this out, but I think you guys can follow me. And then I just lined up the bottom of my headdress to the bottom of the construction paper of my choice, the color, and I just pressed that down really flat and got those edges down nice and flat. And then you have your finished project. Now, I will note, if you used a piece of paper from your drawing pad, this paper is 9 by 12. This is the same size as most construction paper. It fit perfectly. But if you used copy paper, your copy paper would probably be a little smaller than your construction paper. So your feathers may not reach the edges of your construction paper, which that would be fine. You could just leave it like that. Or if that bothers you, you could always just trim. Take your a piece of copy paper and trace it on your construction paper, the edges, and then cut your paper down to size and then glue your headdress on. All right? So that's your finished project. I hope you guys enjoyed the art project for the month. I hope you enjoyed thinking outside the box and being a little creative. And I look forward to seeing your projects. If you want to share them with me personally, you can always send them to me at faithchristianart@gmail.com. That's faithchristianart@gmail.com. And again, I look forward to seeing your beautiful artwork. And just so you know, I have seen the projects you've done in the past. I've seen your silhouettes, I've seen your pumpkins, and they are amazing. You guys are doing a great job. It just brings me so much joy and pleasure when I see your artwork. So keep it up, guys. And I hope you're enjoying this art as much as I am this year. And I hope your families have a wonderful, happy Thanksgiving this month. And let's just remember to just always count our blessings, because there's always something to be thankful for. Well, take care, guys. And I'll see you next month. Bye.